Welcome to my video. If the title and thumbnail have not told you otherwise, well, my sister made me make this video, so you got her to thank. My sister is CoolGale on chess.com. She's rated about 1,000 on Rapid, so let's get into the game. She's playing against someone by the username of Untitled Unnumbered. Very interesting username, and also I like the cowboy hat, you know, rocking that Texas style cowboy hat. So, you know, my sister does a good job of controlling the center and developing her pieces. Developing her pieces towards the center, so that's good for her. Bishop g4, h3, bishop takes f3. Obviously, if you drop the bishop back, then g4 traps the bishop. As since you put the pawn in g6, you've forfeited that escape square, so taking makes the most sense. Queen takes f3, knight c6. Ooh, I think y'all want evaluation bar. And as I was mid-opening, I realized that you guys have no evaluation bar, so enjoy that. White played d5, knight d4, queen d3. So far pretty normal. I wouldn't advise en passant because I feel like you have a very strong pawn on d5, but honestly, this is more for entertainment. I'm not going to nitpick everything. Bishop g5. Now something I will nitpick is bishop takes f6. Now actually for that level, I don't mind that move. However, at a higher level, it's a strategic mistake because you have this concept where both of you have a dark square bishop. So by trading off the bishop, your opponent has what's called an unopposed dark square bishop, where basically this bishop cannot be rivaled by a bishop of the same color anymore. So if you go back, let's say that you had done something like, I don't know, go queen d2. So you went queen d2. And then they just play something and you play bishop h6. You could try for a strategy like that, where you just try to trade off the bishops. And if the bishops are traded, that could favor you because you have your queen just sort of in their face. So that's just something to think about. Whereas in that context, the knight is not as valuable. And now, if you're thinking about an attack with moves like queen a5, rook c8, having a pawn storm, things like that, this bishop is going to be very active for the attack. You know, it's just pointing directly towards the queen side, which is where you're castled. So strategically, I'm not a big fan of bishop takes f6. Now, I think if you wanted to justify it, the way I would do it is by following up with this move h4, and quite simply just trying to go h5 and crack open the position. So let's say that black tries to do the same, a5, h5. If it's taken, then that's just a strategic disaster because you've doubled your pawns and you just opened the h and g files potentially. And if they allow you, you can then just take and then play like queen h3 and just try to get in. You know, in this particular position, I mean, you might wonder why is, you know, white not completely winning. Black has to find this move, rook e8, so that if queen h7, they just hide, and queen h8 is not possible because of the bishop, and somehow what black is doing fine, but, you know, on a practical note, you wouldn't allow that. Like, I don't know. Queen h3, what if they just blunder mate in one, you know? You never know. So that's how I would approach it. It's a very common attacking theme where if they have the fianchetto structure and they're castled that way, you can use an h-pawn to just try to put a dent into their defense, if that makes sense. So bishop e2, queen a5, so black is sort of continuing with the theme of trying to attack on the queen side. And actually, they have a direct threat of just taking the knight, then taking the a-pawn. And so my sister plays a3. I would rather king b1, just so that, because if you move a pawn, you kind of leave a hook for your opponent to attack. But neither here nor there. Knight e5 was played, queen d5. Again, if I were to nitpick, I probably wouldn't put the queen on d5 because it can easily be attacked. So if black just plays a move like queen c7, rook d8, and e6, then suddenly you just have to worry about your queen. I think computer said queen b5, which makes more sense, because if then black tries to retreat and attack, you have an easier escape square. Even like queen d2 is probably totally fine. But queen d5 was played, queen takes, rook takes, and then, you know, pretty normal position. This trade happened, which I actually like. You know, normally I don't necessarily just support bishop for knight trades, but it does result in an isolated a-pawn. And I'm wondering if, like, rook a5, although rook a5, you could try to go after the pawn, but your rook also gets stuck. So, yeah, this is where the trouble starts. Rook d2. Rook d2 puts your rook on the same diagonal as your king, which allows bishop g5. Bishop g5 just pins and wins the rook. There's no f4 because, well, I mean, you could play it, but if f4, you just take the pawn and renew the pin. So, yeah, my sister's just going to be down in exchange. h4, just trying to kick the bishop. Bishop takes, king takes. So being down in exchange is not the end of the world, but you have to take this very precisely. I think the best thing to do when you're down in an exchange is just not do anything. I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but this is an example. My sister, and it's actually not a bad move according to the computer, my sister played b4, which I probably wouldn't play practically, because now it gives my opponent holes to attack. Whereas now the b pawn's attacked, you do definitely want to protect it. But if I go b3, then suddenly the rook is blunted. And then honestly, if you just do nothing, then how's your opponent going to break through? I mean, they probably have something like d5 or like f5 or something like that. But you make your opponent, you know, break through rather than giving them weaknesses. So b4, you know, they could play like c5 or a5. Not that those are necessarily the top moves. It just kind of gives you that concept. Also, like, maybe a3 is weak in some positions. Like, I don't know, for example, a5 takes, rook a8. If nothing's done, then this will be taken, and now you have a weakness to target. And if you're down in exchange and a pawn, that just makes things worse, which is why I'm making a big deal about, like, creating the weaknesses. So, okay, so c5 was played. Takes, then knight a4, rook e8, king c3, rook b to c8. So as you can see from the eval, like, it's not like terrible, but you have to play like very accurately. And then king c4 just like makes things worse because black has this move rook d4 and just picking off a pawn. And the more pawns you can pick off, the better. So the game continued, f3, and I'm not even expecting my sister to play accurately here. I mean, you're down now in exchange and a pawn, and you have the rooks just attacking you from all angles of the board. I mean, soon it's kind of close to game over if you really think about it. Like with the rooks, like if you can just get some mate set up or something like that. Like here, I would definitely play rook takes f3 and try to get checkmate. Although at that level, you're not exactly going to be accurate all the time, but it's still completely winning. Like the pawns are just falling one by one. You know, black plays a nice practical move here, which is rook g2, just trading the rooks. When you're up a ton of material, it's okay to trade. So rook g2, and then my sister takes the pawn, but the knight is attacked, and then now my sister's opponent plays a nice practical move, which is rook takes e3. Not necessary, but the endgame is winning nonetheless, because, like, you never know. If you slip up with, like, rook h2, then boom. Always good to just get rid of the knight if you can, and then this is completely winning. They just chose to, I guess, use the queen, like the pawn, as a deflection so that the king can go over there and take. And then, you know, just completely winning. Just completely winning. You just queen the pawn, and it's stalemate. Yeah. Just imagine that. You worked so hard, you got to that position, you make good practical choices, then it's just a draw. Comment below, is stalemate stupid or is it a good rule? Now, so what I would say, I mean, if I have a student and they're asking me about stalemate, now if you have like queens on the board or like, you know, queen and rook and stuff like that, I would make sure to like be checking your opponent constantly, because if you check your opponent, then there's no stalemate, because then it would be checkmate. However, in a position like this, I mean, I hate to give this piece of advice. You just have to manually make sure that, like, okay, I make a queen. Does he have a move? Then you just realize he doesn't. And so if I play, like, f2, does he have a move? I have the h1 square. And then when I queen, it's check. In fact, it's checkmate. Or if you want to be insulting, you can make a rook and make that checkmate. Actually, that's not checkmate, but you can still do that nonetheless. Is there some mate with the knight? Yeah, you can make a knight. And then, oh, king g3 is the fastest mate. That's kind of savage. And then you just move the knight, and then that's checkmate. Okay. Well, here ends the game analysis. And that actually got me thinking about, when was the last time I got a stalemate? Either I got stalemated or I stalemated. I guess if you stalemated, that's what you mean when you say, like, you're completely winning, then you stalemate. Whereas if you've been stalemated, that's where you're losing. I don't know. Comment down below. So, I'll just go back a few moves. This was some blitz game. In fact, let me see if I can, like, remember, if I remember this game. If this, like, invokes any emotion. Just a normal Queen's Gambit game. Taking on c5 is interesting. Why didn't I play d5? Oh, d5 allows c4. Okay, that makes sense. But c4, oh yeah, bishop f2, and then you take with tempo, I think. But whatever. It's blitz. And actually here, no. Sometimes there could be ideas of knight g4, but I think there's just enough protection on the f2 square. So yeah, queens were traded, and then pawns were probably dropped, yep. And then f-pawn was dropped. Oh yeah, and then my opponent plays a nice tactic with rook takes, because the bishop is protecting the rook. So she can sack, so that if I take back, she takes, and it's completely winning. And I say she, I assume from the profile picture, although you just never know what to assume, but whatever. I'll just assume from the profile picture that I'm playing a female. Although, could be not catfish, because I'm not, like, trying to do stuff, but okay. Yeah. So I think actually it was drawn until, like, here. Oh, I don't even have the bar up. Yeah. So this is apparently drawn if I just play g3. And the idea is, let's say they just wait. I just hang around with king f5 and king g6. Whereas when I go king h5, I'm sure this was like time pressure or whatnot. Then she just plays king f6. Then suddenly I'm in sort of a zugzwang. So I don't know, my king is trapped. I have to play g3. And then this is just losing, apparently. I'm not here for an in-depth analysis. We're just trying to, like, you know, make fun of my opponents. And then stalemate. It is kind of hard to win. You have, I think the most convincing technique is to play g4 if you're black. And then, no, wait, was that what I thought about? Actually, let me just put this in analysis, because, like, that was the game page, and so it kind of, like, turns white every time I do a variation. So, yeah, so it's g4, king h4, and then you just wait, king f6. No, there was something more convincing I saw. Oh, you know what? I think knight e4 might be more convincing. You're attacking the pawn. Then check. King e5. Then at some point you just, like, like, opposition him and end up winning. It's pretty difficult, I gotta say. Now, a more treacherous example was this. Let me put this in analysis so that doesn't white out. Let's again look through this game, just see if I remember it. Not necessarily. It's Queen's Gambit declined. Fianchetto the bishop. I think I actually vaguely remember this, just winning the pawn, but then they have some ideas on the diagonal. G6 just ensures that there's no more checkmate. And then pieces are traded. Queen G5. Sorry, just going through this. Yeah, this past D pawn looks scary. I would not want to deal with it. Knight C6, takes. Knight F4, threatening a pseudo checkmate, even though it's not because of the queen. I guess Knight E2 check looks tempting, but they just move away. Oh, and then I just hang F7, then hang everything. Then I should be losing. Here there's a crazy mate in 4 after rook D7, and then you sacrifice the rook, and then go queen G8 and checkmate. But it's hard to just get yourself to just sack the rook when you're completely winning. Like, this is totally fine. And then my opponent forced a trade of queens, which again, they're ahead in materials. So that's totally fine. And then I got a fork, yay, but then they get a queen, and then I play till stalemate. Now this is the most classic stalemate. So you have the queen a knight's distance away from the king. This is like what we teach when we teach the king and queen checkmate. Like, you gotta make sure to give the king some space. And a 2000 rated player didn't. I think I'll end the video here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, of course, but peace out.